Okay, good morning. Sorry for the late start. Sorry for the late start. Um, so, we're scheduled for a review today. I assume that you're all kind of emotionally exhausted at this point. Um, right. So I thought what I would do is, let's see, I thought something that might be fun to do is look at how causal theories and so on work out for the case of colour, which is something that we haven't looked at before and is not actually explicitly in the readings we've done. So we'll come on to that in a moment. But first of all, I just want to skip lightly over what we've been doing in the last few weeks. And not so much because I'm going to give you any new information or anything, but to give you the opportunity to give a kind of a chance for you to raise, a peg for you to raise questions if there are things that have puzzled you or bugged you or that you want to communicate about what we've done so far. Okay? And it doesn't have to be very tightly tied to what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be tied at all. If there's something you just want to get off your chest about sense and reference or something, then do it. Right? This is your chance. Okay. And then we'll come on to questions about the inverted spectrum and how we think about reference to colours. Okay, here's an old friend. Here's who said this? Very good, yes. A is a priori and analytic statements of the form. A is B are very valuable extensions of our knowledge. And then how can that be? And we looked at two kinds of causal theory of reference. There's Kripke's, where you get the causal chain being an initial baptism and then a chain of communication where everyone's intending to refer back to the same person as the person they heard the name from. Yep. And then there are these problems with this kind of view, like Madagascar or Spot, yeah, where everyone's intending to refer to the same thing, but the reference shifts. And then there's Evans's kind of picture, where you're talking about the dominant source of information associated with your use of the term, the dominant source of the information in the dossier that you associate with the name. And this has problems too. There are these examples like the astrologer or Chaucer, where you have got a use of a name that a whole bunch of spurious stuff has been associated with. The name still seems to be referring back to the person who was originally dubbed that. So you can find examples like Madagascar that raise problems for Kripke's initial picture and that seem to suggest something like Evans's dominant source of information. And there are examples that seem to shift it back to Kripke. Yeah, that's okay? Is that plain as day? Okay. Everything so far is completely lucid, right? And there's some intuitive connection. We didn't really labor this between rigid designation and the causal theory of reference. Kripke presents rigid designation and the causal theory of reference just as separate parts of the package, and it's natural to wonder if they aren't connected. If you've got a definite description, then we can talk about the denotation of a definite description. That's all right? A definite description, the F, says there's a unique F. Yes? So if there is a unique F, we can call that the denotation of the description. And the denotation of a description will typically vary from world to world so that the description counts as flexible. So the thing about that is, if you just pause there a moment, what you're doing is you're holding fixed the meaning of the description. The description means the same thing, but in different worlds it denotes different people. The President of the US in 2001, you can hold fixed the meaning of that, but speculate what might have happened had different people been the denotation of that term in 2001. Yeah? That's all right? But if you've got a simple name, a name that doesn't have any structure, all that there is that gives it meaning is a causal chain connecting it to the object, then if you're going to hold constant the meaning of the name, and then can use that name to describe different counterfactual scenarios, then it seems like you must hold the causal chain fixed. Because the causal chain is all that's fixing the meaning of the name. That's all right? But if you're going to hold the causal chain fixed, you've got to hold the object fixed. You couldn't have the same causal chain, but a different object at the end of it. That makes no sense. It's like, I mean, I should have put this as like a telephone conversation. If I have a telephone conversation with you, I couldn't have the very same, one and the same telephone conversation with someone else. I mean, if you were in it, if you were the person on the other end of the conversation, then that's what makes it that conversation, that you were the person on the other end. You see what I mean? So with a causal chain, if you're going to hold the causal chain fixed, you've got to hold the object fixed. So if you're going to hold the meaning of the name fixed, as you're considering different possible counterfactual scenarios, you've got to hold the object fixed. So it looks like on a causal theory of reference, the name has to be a rigid designator. Yeah? Okay? It's only okay to let me go on if all this seems pretty straightforward and stuff you've heard 100 times. Yeah. Don't pause me if this doesn't seem completely straightforward. Will it? Okay, there is room for discussion about this, but okay, let's look at informative identities. Is this identity informative? Put up your hand if you say the answer is yes. If you say the answer is no. Well, that's reasonably rewarding, not very rewarding. But why don't you know? Put up your hand if you don't know if this is informative or not. Okay, what further information would be helpful? Whether they're actually pictures of the same person. Yes, I agree that would be helpful in telling you whether it's true, right? But if you need that further information, that can only be because this is informative. Yeah, if it was uninformative, then you could tell just by thinking about it. Let's just go with this. A equals A holds a priori, and according to Kant is to be labelled analytic. So an identity that is a priori and analytic, is that informative or uninformative? Uninformative. Put up your hand if you say the answer is uninformative. And if you say the answer is informative, oh, thank God, okay. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Wait a minute, where's it gone? Okay, so is this a priori and analytic, that it's the same person? Yes? I agree, something of that... Sorry? No, something of that grammatical shape can be informative. I agree, that's just right. If I say... this is a photograph. Is it? Uh-huh. If you remember, what I was arguing was... You remember that thing with the ducks or the geese or whatever it was? Yeah. I don't know why you're laughing. The birds, right? And you say, what does this refer to? Is it the one that best matches the photo? As it would be if it was like a description? We don't know if it's the same photo. That's exactly right, yeah, that's right, right. But the descriptive content of the two photos is exactly the same, whichever happened. What you're describing is a possible difference in the causal background to these two images. The qualitative descriptive content is exactly the same. Yeah, yep. Yeah. The pixel for pixel identical, yeah. That's right. But what I mean to be asking is this guy the same as this guy? Yeah. That's the question. Yeah, I wasn't fully explicit about that, that's fair enough. But I'm treating them as representational. I'm saying, is the guy that this one's a photo of the same as the guy that this one's a photo of? Yeah. And I say that doesn't seem to be a priori. Because this is causal, right? It has to do with the causal background to the thing. That's all right? Okay. So if signs have their references fixed by causal chains, then it seems like an identity where you've got one sign here and the other sign here, an identity sign in the middle, how could that ever be informative? I'm sorry, how could that, whenever I say informative, I mean uninformative, right? You understand, right? Okay. To be told that this is true, it requires that the causal chain in back of this one is going back to the same object as the causal chain in back of this one. Yeah? But that's got to be informative. Yeah? That was the puzzle I was raising. How could it be uninformative to be told that? Yeah? If you accept the causal theory of reference. If you think the model of the photographs is a good one for singular terms, which anyone who holds a causal theory thinks is not a bad start, anyway, is the model of a photograph. That's clear? Put your hand up if that's not perfectly plain that this is a puzzle. Okay, yes, yes. Uh-huh. It's not all that puzzling. Once you make the distinction between, good, okay. Let me try this. You've got, when you have inferences like this, the morning star is F and the morning star is G, then the morning star is both F and G, right? If these identities are informative, then it looks like you're always going to need an extra premise here. Yeah? But if you need an extra premise here, once you say I need an extra premise here, because really, this is not a case in which I'm talking about the signs, right? I'm talking about the star. Yeah? So if you and I are gossiping about someone, I'm saying the things I could tell you about Bill, and then I tell you Bill this and Bill that, yeah? And you're taking it, it's the same person all the way through, you're building up a picture of Bill, yeah? It's Bill I'm talking about, and a dossier, remember I said a dossier is when you've got a whole bunch of information where you can just infer you infer trading in the identity of the thing all the way through. You can just take it, you don't need to keep substantiating the claim that it's the same thing. But look, if you need to substantiate the claim that it's the same thing here, then you are really in trouble. Because look, now I'm going to have to add an extra premise, right? The morning star 1 is identical to the morning star 2. Yeah? And then you say, now I've got that extra premise, then the inference will go through. Right? That would be the idea. But you see the problem with this? Right, and if I've got this, if I've got this problem and I say, okay, so the morning star 1 is the morning star 2, right? And I'm saying these identities are always informative, yeah? Then will just adding in that premise let me make the inference? No, it will not. Because how do I know that this sign refers to the same thing as that sign refers to? Or that this sign refers to the same thing as the second morning star refers to? I actually haven't solved the problem by adding an extra premise. I actually now have a much worse problem, right? Because I now have to get it, because this identity of this with that is informative, and the identity of this with that is informative. So I've actually got, what have I got to do? I've got to add a further premise. Actually, I've got to add a further 2 premises, right? Right? The MS A is the MS B, and the MS D is the MS E. Missed it, C, but this doesn't matter. Yes. That's right, but an inference involving propositions can be valid depending on the identity of its constituents. You see what I mean? What validity is when you've got a pattern of repeated occurrences of constituents. I remember when you were doing, you guys all did propositional logic at some point, right? And what you're doing there is, you've got a pattern of P's and Q's or whatever it is, right? And the whole way an argument works is by getting that structure of repeated elements. Yeah, seeing the pattern of repeated elements in the structure. Yeah, that's essential. You've got to be able to say when I've got P again in the structure. And once you move to predicate calculus, yeah, once you're looking inside the sentence, then the validity of the inference is depending on the repetition of elements inside the structure. And you really need that to get the inference going, because you can see what's going on here, right? I mean, at this point, I've got how many? I've got 3 premises here and 2 premises there to get my conclusion. But is any of this enough to get me the conclusion? No, I need more premises. You see what I mean? And we're off. You know, this thing is never going to come to an end. It is only going to come to an end if at some point you say, well, I can just do this kind of trading an identity immediately. Sometimes the identity is not informative. Yeah, I can just make an inference that uses the identity without asserting it. Yep. But where did the next 2 come from? Well, the problem arose because you're not allowed to take it for granted that the uses of the morning star in the first 2 premises refer to the same thing. Yep. So now I've added another premise here, right? So now I have these 2 uses of the morning star. Yeah. Do I have the right to just take it that this use of the morning star refers to the same thing as that use of the morning star? Right, well, but presumably by the same reasoning that said this is informative, you're going to say, oh, well, that one's informative too. Yeah? Yeah. So, but if you, on the other hand, if you are going to say this one's uninformative, you can just do that. Well, you could just have done that already back at the starting point. You see what I mean? So once you say it's always informative, I'm just going to bite the bullet in that, then you can't ever make this kind of inference. Yeah? But that's what having a dossier is. Yep. Yes, yes. I think it's a bit, it's not just, I'm not raising this exactly as an objection to the causal theory, because the arguments in favour of the causal theory seem so powerful, right? And the whole way it connects to epistemology seems so powerful and intuitive. But once you accept it, there seems to be a real problem as to how this kind of inference can be valid. And what I'm saying is it must be valid, sometimes, this kind of inference. Yes, that's right, yeah. That's right, that's what I mean about this one, yeah. That's right. Yeah, I mean, the subscripting there doesn't really make any sense. If you see what I mean, it's, you just have to, really you just have to keep saying the morning star. And then it's just very obvious it's not going to work. Subscripting actually isn't going to help, if you see what I mean. It doesn't make any difference to the fundamental problem. Is that making sense? Yes. Yes, that's right. I would need some pretty elaborate technical stuff to make fully explicit what I meant here. But what I meant was these are two different signs. Yeah. But it could be the same sign, if you see what I mean, being used twice. Just as here, these are 2 different photos. Yeah. There are 2 different token photos. Yeah. Okay, I agree I didn't put that all that clearly. Okay, yep. Okay. Yes, that's right. Okay. That's good. Okay. If this is really a description, yeah, I was just taking it that this doesn't have significant structure, yeah, that this is a name, yeah. So it might be better if I said Hesperus is S, F, and Hesperus is G, yeah. There you don't have any structure to work with. Do you? Really, I have always been thinking of it as round the other way, that with descriptions, you have structure. Yeah, so you don't need a causal theory for the whole description. It's when you get a simple name that it can't be analysed in descriptive terms as a quantifier. So you've got to have a causal chain. There's nothing else to look to fix its meaning. Okay, yep. Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's very good. That would go back to what I was saying last time about, when I was torturing in the last session about Evans on intention and causal chain. Yeah, there's what's in your head as orienting what kind of causal chain you're concerned with. Yeah, and setting a kind of teleology, a kind of goal-directedness for your use of the sign, and that's why I was talking about validity and so on. Yeah, so you could say, well, there's got to be some orientation in my head towards a particular object. Yeah. With the first premise and with the second premise, and if it's the same orientation, then I can trade in the identity, something like that. Yeah, I do think that's an interesting line of thought. The danger is that the way you'd really get the effect you want is to say the orientation in my head towards a particular object is given by description, right? That would really be the richest possible way of getting what you mean by the inside the head bit, fixing the orientation. But then it's game over, right? You want the causal chain to be doing some work, yeah? So if it's just is some star or other in the morning, something like that. I really want to be talking about a heavenly body, not a spot before my eyes or something like that. Then if it's a more general kind of orientation in the head, then that's not going to be enough to guarantee sameness of reference. That's what I was trying to catch last time was talking about validity, and the goal-directedness in the head was that even if you don't have an intention, even if you can't articulate an intention to pick out a particular object independent of the causal chain, there can still be some inside the head orientation going on. But I don't see that's going to be enough to make this uninformative. Yep. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. But it's not that I'm saying that we should give up the causal theory because of that. So let me just suggest a line here, and then let's get on to colour. Is that the way to do it? This is coming up to your last chance to raise anything about this part of the class. Okay. Okay. Eek. Right. Okay. Here's a kind of direction of thought that seems to be helpful here. It might work at the end and it might not, but one thing you could say is, look, there's a confusion here about what's a priori and what's not a priori. What's a priori is a general form of argument. Like what you study in logic when you're doing a logic class is general forms of argument. You get these schematisms, yeah, for particular forms of argument. Particular arguments you study, particular bits of prose in English that you put into formalism. They're just examples. But what you're interested in is whether something like this general form of argument, A is F, A is G, A is F and G, whether that's valid. Yeah, that's what you're learning about in logic. You could say, well, it's a priori which general forms of arguments are valid, but think is not usually a priori whether any particular argument you give is actually of the form you think it is. So think about how this works in perception. Suppose that I'm talking about that bag as you move around. I say, that bag has been with me for years. That bag is my closest friend. That bag means more to me than you can possibly imagine, and so on. Then I'm taking it, as I say, that bag, that there isn't some substitution going on. You see what I mean? It's not that some devious swindler is popping out one bag for another as I speak. If that was happening, then I'd be referring to different bags. Yeah? But suppose it's not. Then I have the right to just take it without further ado, that it's the same thing. Just as we all sit here right now, if we talk about the floor, you know, this floor badly needs cleaning and so on, then many distinguished feet have trodden this floor. All that kind of stuff you could say about the floor. Well, of course, it's a kind of abstract possibility that aliens are zapping out the floor and replacing it with a different one from moment to moment. So it's not a priori that that's not going on, but you have the right to take it that that's not going on. Yeah, life would be very different if you didn't have that right. You don't have to articulate a premise here and then substantiate it. That's not the way it works. You just have the right to take it. It is the same object, and trade in that in inference, even though it's not a priori that you're right, and even though you're not infallible about it. Okay, so that's a quick resolution of that problem. Okay, so the thing here is that logic was invented by people who were mathematicians, by people who were thinking about mathematics as the basic case. And it all looks different when you're thinking about words for regular concrete objects. Logic looks different. So in math, it likely is true that you, a priori, what the form is of a particular argument that you're giving. But really, you can never quite get away from your anchoring in perception in the concrete world in reasoning about concrete objects. Okay, we're ready to wave goodbye to all that? Yep. Where the right comes from. Where you do have the right, yeah. That's right. Well, there'll be a room for a lot of different views as to where you get that right from, yeah. One picture would be, look, the world really is that way. And evolution designed me for my perceptual system. I mean, there's some sense in which, look, watch me as I wave this around. Does the perceptual appearance of this change from moment to moment as I do it? Yes, sure. I mean, it's visibly changing its angle. But is it manifest to you in perception that it's one and the same object the whole way through? Well, again, sure it is. So, or it's not changing in color as I move it around, even though the way it's hitting the light is different. Yeah. So there are these constancies in vision, yeah, that manifest sameness of object through change in the way it's hitting you. That vision just informs you about, and evolution gave you that, and you have the right to take that at face value, that it's the same object over time, because of its what's the word I want? It's respectable evolutionary pedigree. Yeah, you do live in a world of stable objects, and in fact, you have the right to take perception like that. Yeah, yeah. On the other hand, you could say, well, no, it's not. That's not exactly the way to think of it. Experience couldn't provide room for the thought of experience itself, unless it couldn't provide room for self-consciousness, unless it was experience of a world of independent objects. But experience of a world of independent objects just does require experience of these constancies. Therefore, you have the right to do that. Yeah. So if you were Kant, you would say something like that. Yeah. And you would say it's nothing to do with evolution. You just couldn't have experience of an objective world at all. You couldn't have experience at all unless you had experience where you had the right to do that. Yeah. So you can have highly top-down and highly bottom-up approaches here. As usual in this class, even when we're looking at something relatively technical, you're always on the edge of something really overpoweringly metaphysical. Okay? Okay. The inverted spectrum. How many of you guys have thought about probably everyone in the room's thought about the inverted spectrum before. You know what I mean? If the phrase the inverted spectrum makes no sense. Nobody? Usually you find that philosophy students have been thinking about this kind of thing since they were 12, quite unprompted. Yeah. The idea is that, maybe what you look at when you look at this picture is the same as what I see when I look at this picture. You see what I mean? Maybe you see the colours all the other way around to me. Yeah? Does that make sense? And here's Locke introducing the idea. Here we have some violets. Violets? Actually, statistically, there are bound to be. Well, some people in the room, well, this isn't making any sense, but anyway. There's nothing for it but to proceed. Okay, violets. And here we have some marigolds. And Locke said, I mean, as you can see, they're quite different in colour, right? There's the violets, there's the violets, marigolds. Okay. Okay. And Locke said, if the idea that a violet produced in one man's mind by his eyes were the same that a marigold produced in another man's, and vice versa. So you see what he's saying? So if the idea that the violet produces in your head is the same as the idea that a marigold produces... No, wait a minute. If the idea that a marigold produces... let me take this from the top. If the idea that a violet produces in my head is the same as the idea that a marigold produces in your head, right? And vice versa. Let me see if I can do it the other way. So the idea that the violet produces in your head is the same as the idea that the marigold produces in my head. Yeah? So Locke says, one man's mind could not pass into another man's body to perceive what appearances were produced by these organs. Right, so we can't tell that this is going on. Neither the ideas hereby, nor the names, would be at all confounded or any falsehood in either. Suppose this is going on, he says, it doesn't matter. It's not important, there's no confound, there's no error. For all things that had the texture of a violet, and by texture he means the underlying physical structure, the physics of the violet. All things that have that physical structure that the violet has, producing constantly the idea which the other guy calls blue. So when the other guy looks at the violet, he's getting the idea that you get when you look at the marigold, but he calls that idea blue. Yes? Okay. And those which are the texture of a marigold, producing constantly the idea which he has constantly called yellow, he would be able as regularly to distinguish things for his use by those appearances and understand and signify those distinctions marked by the names blue and yellow. So the other guy's experiences are all the other way around from yours, but the other guy still uses blue in connection with the same objects as you do. The other guy still uses the word yellow in connection with the same objects that you do. The other guy classifies and discriminates using the words exactly the same way you do. Exactly as if the appearances or ideas in his mind received from those two flowers were exactly the same with the ideas in other men's minds. You see what I mean? You see what he's saying? It doesn't make any difference. So the picture is there's an external physical structure out there that's producing your idea when you look at the violet. That external physical structure is producing my idea when I look at the violet. They might be different ideas, but they're both being caused by the same structure out there. Yeah? And what we're really doing is using the ideas as signs of the presence of that structure. So this is like Putnam and Natural Kinds, right? We use our ideas of colour as signs of a structure out there. So it doesn't matter if, it's just like using different words, if your colour sensations are a different way around than mine. So Locke has a causal theory of reference for colour terms. In fact, Locke has a causal theory of signification generally. Okay, this is just some more pictures to ram the point home. You see the idea of inverted spectra, that you can keep the structure of someone's colour space the same, but move the absolute values of the colours around. Yeah? Okay. So just as names represent in virtue a causal relation to an object, words for like water and gold represent in virtue of a causal relation to the stuff. Colour perception represents the colours of the objects around us by in virtue of causal relations to the object. So the color experience stands for, the color experience refers to the type of physical structure that typically causes it. So this is this is a physical diagram of the kind of spectral surface reflectances that we're talking about here, right? The ratios of wavelengths of light of different wavelengths, the ratios of light of different wavelengths that are being reflected from the surface that determine what color we call it. Yeah. Yep. What about a colorblind person? Yep. Okay. Okay. There are two things about this. First of all, there is a really interesting debate going on right now about the perception of colorblind people. I think that the usual view is the one you just stated, that if someone's red-green colorblind, then there is what you might call a zone of indifference, where they're seeing red or green and they've got something else, right? There is, there's a colorblind philosopher, Justin Brooks, who has red-green color blindness, and he's been arguing that that's not actually the right description of what goes on in color blindness. If you take, say, a lump of coal, or even something like this, you might say, look, is that black or is it blue? Even if your color vision is very good, you can be unsure whether the thing is black or blue, right? If you're looking at a rock or a bit of coal or something. And so what you do if you're saying, is it black or is it blue, is you kind of put it out in the light, you look at it in different conditions of illumination, you just spend a while squinting at it, and eventually you get it, you say, oh, it's blue, it actually is blue, I thought it was black, yeah. That can really happen, right? So Brooks' idea is that with someone who's red-green colorblind, it's just like that. You look at it now and you think, that's green, and then you look at it again, no, that's red. Yeah, a regularly color-sighted person doesn't have that difficulty. But what's going on for the color blind person is that it's kind of unstable. Now it looks red, now it looks green, and then it will shift, right? But so in that picture, the color blind person is much less unlike. You know, they just have more difficulty in making out whether it's red or green than the regular person does. But supposing you've got the zone of indifference, the way you said, then Locke's picture is going to be, there is some physical structure out there that the red-green colorblind person is picking up. It's going to be a coarser region than a regularly color-sighted person picks out. But their sensation of grayness, or whatever it is still standing for that big slab of surface spectral reflectances. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah. 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 Yes, we are being scientific realists about it, yep. That's the view I'm sketching, yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's, well, okay, there are separate questions about whether the inverted spectrum is possible, yeah. But let's just take a very simple example. Suppose that, suppose we can make color inverting prisms. Yeah, you put the goggles on. Yeah. And then it turns out some people are born with these very kind of prisms, but they're actually tucked away behind their eyes. So it never shows up in regular conversation. But then you do a, what's the word I want? An autopsy once they're dead. You open them up, you look, my God, there they are. They were seeing everything. You could find that out, couldn't you? That's right. Yeah. Yeah. In theory, you could figure it out. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so it wouldn't be completely unknowable. Yeah, you're raising the question whether a completely unknowable in spectrum inversion is possible. Yeah, that is a good and difficult question. Yeah, and I share your inclination to say that's not really possible. But for all, I think what Locke wants is for all practical purposes in ordinary communication, yeah, it would be unknowable. But it wouldn't matter for the communication. That it's not as if we could, oh, well, now, only now do we understand what he meant that whole time. Now we've opened them up and seen the prisms. Because the whole time you were just talking about those surface spectral reflectances, right? So you got your idea of redness, there's the physical texture out there, and that's what your talk about redness is referring to. Yeah? You don't have any notion of what that texture is, right? I mean, it's very technical, as you can see. Yeah, yeah. But you didn't know about all that stuff just by having the idea. But the idea was standing for that complicated texture. So you could have twin Earth cases, right? I mean, maybe in twin Earth, the idea of, maybe on Earth, the idea of red is produced by surface spectral reflectance. One is light of a particular kind of wavelength that produces that idea. Yeah. And twin Earth, it's a different surface spectral reflectance that produces the idea. So on Earth and in twin Earth, we'd both have sensations of red, but we'd be talking about quite different things. Yeah? Yep. Yes. Yep. Yes. Women are normal too, but but I know what you mean. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it. Okay, there is this idea of what is it, tetrachromats, people who have a higher dimensional color space, and I guess it's true that it's often hypothesized that women there are a high proportion of these among women. Yeah, yeah. I guess that in this picture, what would be going on is that just as with a colorblind person, they'd be being sensitive to a big zone of a bigger, coarser zone of physical textures, yeah, and referring to a bigger, coarser zone of physical textures than an ordinarily color-sighted person. Yeah, someone with this higher level, finer discriminating color experience would be picking out some finer set of distinctions among the physical structures that actually are out there. I guess it would be different, yeah. But the thing is, with that one, I guess you could test it. Yeah, I mean, because you'd be able, if you find a couple of tetrachromats, you'd be able to see that they were making discriminations among objects that regular people couldn't. Yeah, they would sort them more finely than regular people would. I mean, I'm using regular here, but you see what I mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay? Okay, so that's to say, remember Isaac Bashevis, the singer guy who walks out from his home village for hundreds of miles, and then someone turns his shoes round, and he walks back for hundreds of miles without realizing it. Do you remember that story? Yeah. And he gets back to his own village without realizing that he had. So he can say these are different people. They look just like the people I used to know. And there are psychiatric patients who have this. You get people who come back from the hospital and they say, look at this, this looks exactly like my apartment. It's not, but it really looks exactly like my apartment. And this looks exactly like my wife. The resemblance is uncanny. It's not my wife, but that's really strange. Yeah, I mean, that is a real problem. They're called, well, one name for them is reduplicative paramnesics. So Isaac Bashevis, the singer's guy, is a bit like that, right? He comes back and he says, this is not my wife in this other village, which is hundreds of miles away from my hometown. Maybe these are not horses the way they look like horses, but they're maybe just some quite different stock. But could he do that with the colours? The colours look just the same, but maybe they're all different. Hey, that makes sense. If this surface spectral reflective thing about twin Earth is right, yeah. If you were moved from Earth to twin Earth, you wouldn't realise that the reference to your colour terms was changing, but it would be, right? You'd be talking about something different. You say what they've got here isn't redness. Yeah. And similarly, when he goes back to his home village, he could say, well, I think the colours here are all different, right? Looks like my wife, but it's not the same. Looks like red, but it's not red. It's not true red. It's not blue, it's grey, right? that raises a whole bunch of issues. Okay. Okay, does that make sense? Put up your, just because I'm curious, put up your hand if you think that makes sense. I mean, just to clarify what I'm asking, it makes sense to say, this looks just like the person who was here last week, but it's not. It might be slightly crazy to have that worry, but it makes sense. You know, what I mean is it's comprehensible. But does it make sense to say these things look just like red things, but they are not red? Yeah? Yeah. Put up your hand if your answer is yes, it makes sense. And if the answer is no, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. I guess I also am kind of torn. Were you going to elaborate that? Okay. It seems to me, suppose that the physicists descend from the science labs and say, look, we've done work in our labs and we've found out that nothing is the color you ordinarily take it to be. The things that people usually think are blue are actually all red. The things that are green, the people that usually take to be green have actually turned out to be a kind of tartan, a kind of plaid. Yeah. I mean, physics tells you lots of surprising things. Would that be okay? Yeah, yeah. It just might be, yes, yeah. Yeah. Well, the things that you think that we all thought were, I mean, physics can tell us that the things that you thought were dangerous are not actually dangerous, right? Or the biologists can tell us the things that you thought were harmful to you. I mean, biologists are always doing this. The things that you thought were harmful to you are not harmful to you. Yeah. That's right, yeah. Uh-huh. Well, the physicists can't tell us that it doesn't spectrally appear to you the way it appears to you. Yeah, that's right. But they're saying, no, the colours are actually all different to the way you think they are. In terms of the qualitative blueness itself, nothing has that quality of blueness. It's all actually a kind of plaid. The sky is actually a kind of plaid. It's not blue, the way people think it is. Yeah, sorry, you yeah. Okay. 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 Well, that's I see that. That's very powerful. But see, it's contradicting Locke. Yeah. Because for Locke, there is that objective standard, which is the texture, the wavelengths that you're actually responding to. That's what sets the objective standard. So we're past the hour, actually. We'll have to stop. Okay, so next time is Putnam on brains in a vat. And we'll actually come back to this in the context of looking at Putnam. Okay, thanks for your questions. Yeah.